My name is Jonathon Rondeau, and I have the pleasure of being the president and CEO. And I realize I am the TED Talk between you and the panel you really want to be here for. But I think as I was thinking about today, in the series of questions that I often get asked as the president and CEO of an organization that was founded to support people with disabilities, is why does that organization care about housing? Why, for today, what's the intersection of housing and main streets? And so I'll share the idea of why our organization was founded. Our organization, Fello, was founded by a group of parents who envisioned a different life for their children who had disabilities. But instead of thinking about the services and programs that they felt that they needed to be successful in life, they were envisioning a world where they were fully included, where they had equity and access, where they could live as independently as they could, and how they could do that with their siblings and loved ones who didn't have disabilities. And so it was this idea that it isn't about the services as an organization we provide, but how do we work with the communities we serve, with other people, partner organizations, to create a life and create conditions in our community where people can be successful. And so it's that idea of equity and inclusion that drives our work each and every day. In many ways, Main Streets thrive because of that similar sense of community. Businesses, community members come together in a thriving network. As we look to the future in Maryland, residents living in that thriving network are an important part of what that future looks like. From a basic perspective, putting housing in our main streets, downtown areas, just makes sense. It's about inclusion. It's about opportunity. What often is missing from that conversation, though, because I think most people in the room believe that housing should be intersected with our main streets, is where does affordable housing fit in? Where do the people that served us last night, that may have made your cup of coffee this morning, that may have cleaned the streets yesterday afternoon, where do they live? In our work, we hear time and time again that people who make under the median income here in Talbot County and the other communities we serve cannot afford to live in their communities. The previous speaker asked that question and half the room raised their hand. But what we know is fundamentally is people don't want long commutes. People want to live, work, connect, and play in their communities, however they define those communities. And it shouldn't be just limited to people who have resources. It also shouldn't be just limited to people who are typically developing. And so how do we look at creating a world, creating communities, creating downtown spaces that connect all those things, that connects housing and commerce in our main streets together so our community can truly thrive? If we connect people, we will better connect our communities. So who am I talking about? Because a lot of these things can seem abstract. So I want to give you 3 examples of people who can benefit from what I'm talking about. Think about Maria. These names have changed, but they are actual people. So if you know of a Maria who works at Easton Elementary School, I'm not necessarily talking about her. I realized as I was about to say that. So think of Maria, a teacher at Easton Elementary School, who talks about commuting 45 minutes each way and having her kids go to a school that is not where she teaches, where she puts in her effort well beyond the 40-hour work week. But she can't afford to live in the downtown area where she could potentially walk to her school, where her kids could walk to school, where she could go to the band concert, where her kids that she teaches play, where her kids would also play. Think of Tim, who works for a local restaurant, but can't afford the apartment that's right above the restaurant that he works in each day. Think of the Smith family, who has 2 children. One of those children have disabilities, but there is no accessible housing for that family in the downtown area. He grew up in a community that he lived downtown, and he really wants that for his family. Those examples are who we're talking about. How do we integrate people of all walks of life into the work that we have here? It's about affordability, it's about access, but it's also about variety. Those are three very different families. People have very differing needs. How do we create that patchwork in the communities that we are? Fello believes we have a solution to that. We believe in infill development. So what is infill development for those of you who don't know what that is? Infill development is development that is recreating space that was used to be used in a different way. It may be underutilized space. It may have been something that was vibrant in the community at one time in the history and does not make sense anymore. It can be an abandoned building. It looks different in all those communities. But it makes sense because we are taking something that may be underutilized or is not being utilized, often in close proximity to main streets or downtown areas, and creating something that has a viable, real purpose into the future. Infill development generally means that you can easily walk to school. You can work and live in your community. People with disabilities can have easy access because the number one barrier for people with disabilities is access to transportation. And so if you can live and work and play in that community, it makes a difference for you. And it brings together all walks of life, whether they were talking about seniors, families, young professionals, and so on. So let me tell you about a few examples of what that looks like here in Easton. So Fello, a few years ago, purchased two former Purdue agricultural sites. For those of you who walked on our walking tour yesterday, you got a chance to see them. Both are on the rail trail, and I'm going to talk about Easton Crossing first. It's a 6.5-acre site located off of Brooklets Avenue. This is a perfect example of infill. It has a railroad, now a rail trail, that goes right through the property. It started out in the early 1900s as a furniture factory where furniture was made and transported off on those trains. And then later in the 50s and 60s was transitioned to Purdue agriculture, where it became grain silos and grain came in and out. It had a bank on site where the farmers would actually cash their checks from Purdue. But since 2018, that site had been not heavily used. And so through community meetings, through partnerships, Fello acquired that site and imagined what could be there. So what will be there? What will be there are 6 buildings over 6.5 acres, about 1.5 acres of public park space that will be connected to the rail trail. It will also include 117 apartments, of which 40 will be some level of affordability. But key to that, regardless of whatever apartment you live in, they will look exactly the same. So someone paying market rent, or someone living in an accessible unit, or someone needing affordability will have that same opportunity. It will also include 24,000 square feet of commercial use space. The commercial space will be facing the rail trail. So as you are accessing the site, as you're walking, you will be accessing the commercial space that way. It gives you an opportunity to be able to live, work, and hopefully play and recreate right in your downtown area. It also creates a huge opportunity to sort of connect a space between what's just north of the Main Street district and allows those businesses, those communities to begin to be connected. But there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to what that infill development can look like. So just less than 1/4 mile down the rail trail is another 2.5 acre site that also used to have grain silos off of Needwood. There will be 28 townhomes that are rentals, of which will be 7 workforce housing for people like Maria, teachers, who may not qualify for the deepest affordable housing, but can't necessarily afford the market rate rent. In addition, we also know that there's a huge shortage in Easton of rental options for families and professionals that are moving in here that can afford market rent. So how do we bring that together? But I think most interesting of what can be replicated in other communities is the work that we're doing on August Street. In the historic district of Easton, there is an 8,000 square foot lot that today we are actively building, and there is the first stages of that, a 7-unit apartment building. So there'll be a 7-unit apartment building on 8,000 square foot lot that will also include 8 parking spaces also on that lot. It will also include stormwater management and all the things that Nick was talking about that are sometimes barriers to be able to be developed. And it's being built as a mansion-style apartment complex. So it blends in with the historic nature of that community. And so these examples that are happening here in Easton are real examples of how you can create viable infill opportunities that really meet the needs of the community in a vibrant way. But you might be asking, well, those are ideas. So how do we know that that's true? Well, we know that's true because a year ago, Fello had the opportunity to open a 24,000 square foot mixed use facility called Port Street Commons on the historic Port Street, which includes 2 pieces. One is our Eastern Shore headquarters, which takes up about 10,000 square feet. And then the other 14,000 square feet includes 9 apartments. Tim is one of the residents of one of those apartments. Yes, thank you. In those apartments includes families, grandparents, people who needed access. It also includes 3 residents who work in Easton who could not live here, who have now moved and lived in the town of Easton as a result of having access to affordable housing. Like our other projects, it happens to be on a rail trail. Apparently, we like property that's connected to the rail trail. But I think what it shows is sometimes you have to imagine what is possible, and sometimes you have to work with a variety of partners to reimagine that. And so while I like talking about the opportunities and the outcome, and oftentimes I spend most of my time talking about the complex timelines and the challenges that there is with development, whether those are regulatory, whether there's community community members who want parking for everyone and no parking for some people, and how you navigate that as you're building new development. What I try to remind community members what I remind our team about, what I wake up every day reminding myself, it's about the day they receive the key to open their apartment. That's the day that they gain a resource that didn't exist in a day. It's about the day that they open that door and call that apartment home. Is really critical, because that's what it's about. It's about creating community. It's about creating opportunities for families to thrive. It's about creating a sense of belonging. We all want to belong. We want to belong in our communities. We want to feel like where we live, where we work, where we recreate, where we just enjoy our time, whether that's by ourselves, whether that's with family, with friends, is where we feel we should be, where we belong. And we at Fello believe that shouldn't be limited based on your access to resources. That shouldn't be limited if you have a disability. It shouldn't be limited based on your zip code. Main streets are a vital part of that connection. And the more we think about how infill development can be a place in them, how we can think about organizations like Fello, who may not be that traditional developer, can help achieve that, we will all reimagine what's possible. Thank you.